Let me start by thanking you for doing this, and also formally introducing you. You know, need no introduction, so this is going to be pretty short because after the infamous Colgate scam, which puts Bad Boy Billionaires, which is a popular sitcom on Netflix, and which puts the scam 1992 to shame, he was put in charge to resurrect the image of the entire coal department. From the coal department, he went on to the education sector, and then he was given charge of being education secretary. He put public-private partnership as his focal point and has done so much for both the private and the public sector. He's one of those few in his service who has an unblemished record, and somebody who I think is an inspiration, not just because of his track record in service, but so also because of what he's done outside of service. He's authored 2 books and he's a great role model to emulate. I'm thrilled, delighted, and humbled to be able to welcome the former Coal and Education Secretary, IAS officer, Anil Swarupji. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you very much. Since you started my introduction with coal, I must share an incident to you straight away. When I was posted as coal secretary, I didn't know much about the coal sector, except having read a few things in the newspapers. So I rang up a friend of mine to ask him, "Yaar, ye coal sector kaisa hai?" So instead of answering a question, he asked me a question. He asked me, "Gangs of Wasipur dekhi hai kya?" You know, so that actually explained everything. So that was my introduction to coal sector. Of course, first I try to do whatever I could.
Oh, how lovely! And it's practically relating to the age bracket. You said it perfectly. He asked you saying Gangs of Wasipur dekhi hai kya? And was your experience like Gangs of Wasipur?
No, it was very different. Actually, things had gone bad, but perhaps not. They weren't as bad as they were made out to be in the CAG report. In fact, in my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, I take on the CAG and tell him that he painted the picture much worse than what it actually was. And secondly, of course, my task was made much easier because I had an amazing set of officers with me. I mean, we used to jokingly say after we had sorted out the coal issue, the coal-related problems, we used to jokingly say, "Give us the Kashmir problem, we just might be able to solve it." So it was an amazing team which thought only positively, which only thought of finding solutions to the problem. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that I had a round table in my room, and when we sat around that round table and we put a problem in the center, almost everyone's mind was digging to find a solution to the problem. So the very, very positive looking people. So my task became easy, and to an extent that when I joined the as coal secretary, I spent initially a few nights in the office. It was pretty bad. But in 2 years' time, I had only 45 minutes of work. Only 45 minutes of work. So much so that I went to the PMO to request them to wind up the ministry, because I said, if you don't do that, you'll create a problem to justify our existence. That could be true of a number of other ministries as well. But coal, I was clear that if the ministry was not required, it could become a part of the mines ministry.
So, but what you just narrated is one of those few examples in bureaucracy where bureaucracy has solved everything without too much of interference per se, and where people have not just interfered for the sake of interfering, and they allowed you to have a free hand. So you've authored this book, a wonderful book, by the way, called The Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the book. But sir, first let me ask you that question, because there are so many people watching live. So these 1,700 students who are watching live, many of them are interested in taking up civil services as a career option. Now, but sir, civil services and the salary that you draw from us as a civil service servant is very different from a professional in a multinational company. Now, the dilemma is always there that if you're academically this proficient, then why not actually go out there and join professional service in comparison to serving the government and the country in a way. So how did you make that choice, and what was your reason to join the civil services?
You know, as I have explained in the first chapter of my first book, Not Just a Civil Servant, I became an IAS officer because my father dreamt of me to become an IAS officer. It was his dream. When I was about 10 or 11 years of age, I found a piece of paper in which he had actually chalked out my entire plan on how I would become an IAS officer. So I actually owned his dream, and then I fulfilled my dream as his dream to become an IAS officer. So frankly speaking, I became an IAS officer because my dad wanted me to become an IAS officer. But I write in the last chapter of my book that if I were to be born again, I'd like to be an IAS officer all over, if I could. And I've tried to explain that. There is no service on earth, no other service, where you can impact the lives of so many people in one go. I mean, just to give you an example, I did a scheme called Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, an health insurance scheme, which impacted 35 crore people of this country. Now, neither Dhirubhai Ambani nor any Tesla and nobody can impact so many people. In fact, so much so that when Obama took over as president of the US, his advisor rang me up, and I was invited to Washington to make a presentation about this scheme on how am I making this impact on the poorest of the poor. Now, the kick, I use the word kick in both of my books, is the sense of satisfaction that you derive out of impacting and helping poorest of the poor who are totally helpless. Now, you have to decide what is the call you want to take. What gives you sense of satisfaction? That's what everyone does. If money gives you sense of satisfaction, probably you could join a multinational. But there's something else that you're looking for, which I did. I call them my Bharat Ratnas in my book. Number of episodes I give, but I got enormous amount of satisfaction, which I can't think any Dhirubhai can get it. So it's your call, and it's very personal in nature. I may feel that this kick is good for me. Someone else, for him, traveling in a Mercedes car would give a greater kick. Though, of course, I have often wondered why people buy a Mercedes car. Because most of the people who buy Mercedes car, the drivers are driving it, they're sitting in the back seat. And it's pretty bad sitting. I have sat in a few Mercedes cars. I came to this conclusion, we buy Mercedes cars for our padosi, for everyone else to see that I am in a Mercedes car. Otherwise, what is the difference? I drive a Baleno, I've driven a Mercedes. I don't think it gives me an additional value of 80 lakhs of rupees for me to invest to buy that car. But then that's a personal call. Someone else may feel, no, I want to buy a Ferrari and travel alone and drive fast and get a kick out of it. I would not want to do that. I'm not saying he's right or I am wrong or I am right and he's wrong. It's absolutely a personal choice. So the guys who want to get into the civil service should have a few things very clear in their mind. And if they read the book, they will get a fairly good picture of what the service is all about. If there is not this dilemma, there are many more dilemmas that you'll face. And my book starts with this couplet. मुख्तसर सी जिंदगी के अजब से अफसाने हैं, यहाँ तीर भी चलाने, परिंदे भी बचाने हैं. Now, this is the excitement of the journey that you go. And then, of course, there are other things.
So what you said, sir, आपको किक मिलती थी, उसके लिए आपने सिविल सर्विसेज ज्वाइन किया, और जैसे आपने बताया that it's very few people who can make that kind of an impact. Probably an industrialist can't, probably a politician can't, but what kind of impact that you can make is one of the reasons why you joined civil services. But sir, कभी मैं आपको frankly पूछता हूँ, sir, कभी आपको ऐसा नहीं लगा in your distinguished career, वहाँ there is a professional, a CEO जो amazing काम कर रहा है, वो बड़ी सी कंपनी बना रहा है, अपने तौर तरीके से he is impacting people, and not just about driving the Mercedes car, but is living a luxurious, flamboyant life. Sir, here आप desk के पीछे काम करते जा रहे हो. It never crossed your mind, because civil services is something that is a long drawn profession. It's not instant gratification, sir. Today we live in a day and age, sir, जब number of likes on Twitter and Instagram and number of retweets, they determine how cool you are. ऐसी generation में shortcut to success is the mantra and the hustle mantra. वो सब, everybody advocates that, sir. Sir, civil services, however, is a long drawn thing. So, sir, never in your service have you ever encountered this kind of a dilemma, saying, why not take...
I was very clear. After I had put in 11 years of service, yes, and of course, whatever little I could do, I got an offer to become an MD of a huge corporation in India, and they were paying salary that no one could think of. Yes. There was another opportunity when World Bank gave me an offer. After I did this health insurance scheme, after that interaction in the US with the advisors of the US, World Bank gave me an offer to give me $1,000 a day to do this scheme in 15 countries. I didn't go. The reason is very simple. The reason is that you have to make a call. I'm not saying, I keep saying, I'm not saying what I'm saying is right. Each individual has to decide for himself, what does he want in life. To me, when you talked of luxury, luxury is defined by each individual. For example, I drive my Baleno, I find it luxurious. Mercedes, I mean, I won't. I mean, it's not that I'm against it, but why would I spend that money on that? I would spend it on something else, which gives me a greater kick. My kid could be helping some people, setting up a school. I mean, I'm saying what I'm saying is not right or wrong. It's a personal choice. So every individual, because I have written in my book, you should not be blaming somebody else for what you've become. The choice is yours. You got to take a call. No, suppose you want to make money. I mean, I jokingly tell people, IAS is perhaps the only service where if you are efficient, you can survive and thrive. If you are inefficient, you can still survive and thrive. If you are honest, you can survive and thrive. If you are dishonest, you can still survive and thrive. So these options are not available everywhere. So you have to take a call. You want to remain honest or dishonest. But when you have to pay a price, because a price has to be paid both for dishonest and honest existence. I have seen 2 chief secretaries of the state where I come from going to jail. So there is a price to be paid. One has to be prepared for that. And once you are prepared for a price, then the life will be good. The problem arises that you start blaming somebody else for your problems. That clarity has to be there. And that's what the dilemma initially is. I mean, I had those dilemmas to begin with in my career. But within 5-7 years, I was very clear in my mind. Dilemmas may have existed, but I had no dilemma in my mind. I had that clarity of thought, I'll do this. And I was prepared for those consequences. You look at I've given about 70 odd instances in my book, where in each case there is a dilemma. But after the initial dilemmas that I had in my mind, later on I'm absolutely clear. Like, for example, everyone thought that I was close to Mr. Modi. And he used to give me a lot of regard. I used to give him a lot of regard. People ask me, how could you speak as bluntly to him as you do to us? In one of the meetings, I remember, I narrated something which I was told he doesn't like. And he went on to agree with me. So outside the joint secretary asked me, sir, aap aise kaise bol lete hain? हमने कहा मुझे इनसे कुछ चाहिए नहीं. I don't need anything from him. I think the basis is what is your expectation of other persons. I never wanted a post-retirement job. Not that I'm against. What I'm trying to say here is, if you don't expect things of others, then you are a very powerful man. If you start expecting things, then you are not so powerful. And this applies, I would believe. Now I'm no more in the government and I'm interacting with a lot of private sector. And I feel that it is as relevant in the private domain as in the public domain. So the fundamental issues and problems are the same. Management structures, approach may be different in public and private, but fundamental issues, fundamental concepts, clarity of thought is applicable as much to the private sector.
So, but aapne बहुत ही important point you brought it to light, and I want to take you to discuss that. You said that you've seen dishonest officers also in the service, you've seen honest officers also in the service, and the fact that IAS is one of those professions where you both dishonesty and honesty आप career काट सकते हो. You can finish your tenure, so to say. Sir, I want to ask you this question, sir. Many considered you close to Prime Minister Modi, and not because of that, but I want to ask you this question because as an author and even otherwise as somebody that is regarded as a public intellectual, my question to you is this, that China and India, when close to independence, we were almost 3.5 to 4 times the size of their economy. At one point in time, even 10 times the size of their economy, sir. Today, we are 4.9 times behind China when it comes to the growth in our country, sir. Sardar Patel called you all, or the bureaucracy, the steel frame of India, sir. Don't you think that there are too many holes in this steel frame now in the bureaucracy? Don't you think that corruption is now is a part of the DNA and the fabric of both bureaucracy and politicians, and the fact that you are probably a rare breed in what otherwise is considered as a Sarkari Babu who usually does not do much? This is the public perception that is created, sir. Is this true? You have been a part of the system firsthand.
You've raised a number of points. Let me take one by one. Let me take first your comparison with China. They are totally uncomparable. Indian context is totally different, so you can't compare it with China because they had a different political system. Now we can argue for long whether that political system is better or this political system is better. I would not like to get into that debate now. But I will try and touch upon the other aspects that you said, because after having said they are not comparable, let us understand the extent to which you hold, or the general public to a certain extent hold, bureaucracy responsible for this. Now, how does bureaucracy work? Bureaucracy works in the context. Now, I'm not very sure that bureaucracy can suddenly become corrupt out of the way. Bureaucracy doesn't live in a zoo. एक अजायब घर में नहीं रहती. It's a part of this society that exists. Now, within this bureaucracy, there are a large number of civil servants. Again, if you read my book, there are more than 50 civil servants I've noted who've done wonderful jobs.
Correct.
Now, the point is, what is the signal that the political boss is giving? We have adopted for democracy. So, ultimate arbiter in decision making is the politician. Now, whether the signal from the top people who are the ultimate arbiter is to encourage honesty and efficiency, or they are encouraging pliability. Now, I can go on, and I have written so much on this issue, that wherever you got the right man at the helm of affairs, he's delivered. Look at Parmeshwaran Iyer, look at Swachhata Abhiyan, look at the way Ayushman Bharat is happening. I mean, I can go on and on, give you examples. Now, it's not that such officers don't exist. But if the signal is that the nincompoop, stupid are being promoted and being given positions just because they are pliable. Now, unfortunately, in democracy, the problem has been pliability has become, it's not that honesty, efficiency is getting rewarded to an extent externally. Most of the honest and efficient officers do it because they themselves get a kick. It's not a recognition that is being given. Unfortunately, in our system, because the way we've evolved, I think the recognition is getting given to a large number of such officers who don't deserve to be there. So, for example, you have to compare the two sectors. This government has done fabulous work in a number of areas. But there are some areas where it has not been able to do. Now, someone should sit down and examine what was the reason that the government was the same, why it didn't happen in this sector and happened in this sector. And there you will come to know the answer. That the people who came to occupy those two positions did not deserve to be there. I have often said, Ayodhya, Ramchandji se chali hai, Khadao se nahi chali. So you have to get the right Ramchandji to every position. Since you live in Delhi, you may not be able to feel it. But in the field, you know if you get a good district magistrate in a district, he changes the face of the district. Now, who posts this district magistrate? The posting is done by a politician. Now, if the signals to the civil servant, again, I have written that in my book, Ethical Dilemmas, if the signal to the bureaucracy is that efficiency and honesty will be rewarded, the 80% people who are sitting on the fence, any organization that 10% incorrigibles on either side, 10% are so good that they won't become bad, 10% are so bad that they will become good. Now, this 80% in between is looking at signals. And if the signal is, कि हमें हम मिलाते रहो, अपनी बात बोलो नहीं, जो हम कह रहे हैं वो करो. If that is the signal that is being given, we are in trouble. And I see that as a major trouble. Because we have to look who are the officers who are getting reported. Whether these are officers who are efficient, honest, efficient, and straightforward, or there are pliable officers who do your bidding whatever you want. It's a tragedy of our existence, but that's, to me, is the major problem. So you can't blame the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy has its problems. I'm not saying bureaucracy is not to be contributing. Because again, if you read the book, ultimately I say in my last chapter that irrespective of these political problems that we have, there are a large number of civil servants who have done good work. So the officer should look at those officers who were able to perform despite these limitations. The outsider doesn't know how it functions in the government. In one chapter, I tried to explain that it is very easy to have an idea. Like these days you have COVID problem, you walk down in a street, almost everyone will tell you how to handle COVID and curse the government. It's not easy. In a democracy unlike China, in a democracy, an idea to fructify and sustain, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, and judicially tenable. And thanks to these farm laws, I've added a seventh dimension, which is it should be emotionally relatable. Now, it might sound a handful for things to be done, but if you look at officers, they have understood the ground reality of these limitations and they've been able to wait the way.
But sir, let me actually draw your attention to this one particular statistic. So you said that the man in charge, if the man in charge or the person in charge of the entire administration gives the right signal, then the 80% will automatically move one side or the other. So this is what
it's not automatic. It doesn't happen that way.
No, they will be given. They would be driven to do that, sir. So let me, sir, from my myopic understanding of being in Bombay and not in Lutyens, Delhi, and from being an outsider to the entire political spectrum, for what we understand, at least in the organization, and what is the statistics that we see. And one such statistic is, sir, India's average investment in the first 50 years after independence was about 3% of the GDP, when actually we required about 6.5%. China, on the other hand, invested nearly...
Investment in what? Investment in this sector?
So our investment overall in infrastructure was about 3 to 4%, sir. And China, on the other hand, invested nearly 9% of its GDP in infrastructure when it could have done with a 6.5% investment. So now this boils down to, of course, the politicians taking the lead, but also the bureaucrats recommending to the politicians. So because don't you think so, between the politician and the bureaucrat is in most cases the more well-read, more qualified, the more educated person who's there, in comparison to the politician who's simply been, of course, with no disrespect, he's been elected, which is why he deserves that. But in many cases, he's catapulted to that position of power because of a favor by person A or B or C or D, which is why he gets that ministerial portfolio. Some of the ministers, with no disrespect to the current establishment, don't even understand the basics of their own department, where they find it very hard to actually understand what's happening in their own department. And this I have been privy to first-hand conversations which have flummoxed me. But sir, without divulging further details, my question to you is this, sir: shouldn't have the bureaucracy in the first 50 years done things otherwise to push the establishment to do a little more when it comes to issues such as infrastructure, developing the economy, and so on and so forth?
See, I am not here to defend the wrongs of the bureaucracy. They should have and they would have done a lot. So let me clarify here. Such decisions as to which sector has to be given more importance is taken politically. It is not taken bureaucratically. Suppose a school has to be built or a railway line has to be drawn. These are political decisions. These are not bureaucratic decisions. Bureaucrats on the file, like for example in coal, I've been there in coal. And there were a number of occasions where I was overruled. So be it. What do? There were a number of other occasions where I was able to convince the politician into taking a particular decision. And some of it gets reflected in my book. Now, the point is, it is an interface between them, both the politician and the senior-most bureaucracy that does it. And that is where ultimate management is getting the right person for the right job. If you don't get the right person for the right job, then you'll get the advice that you want to give. I'll give you an example. And this is totally different from what you asked, but you'll understand how it works. I, after having done a stint as district magistrate, Mr. Kalyan Singh became the chief minister of UP. And for some reason, I had never met him. He made me special secretary. I mean, he must have asked people or whatever. And also director in public relations. So my job was to go to his residence every morning to brief him about the media coverage. I'm talking about 1990.
Okay.
So one fine morning, I reached his residence. It was about 8:30, 9 o'clock. And the chief secretary and DGP were there. They were standing. And the chief minister, was otherwise very somber, polite, was very upset. And I had put in about a month or so. I was very new to the position. So there was a discussion going on and the chief minister was upset because someone had kept about 7 election meetings on a by-election that was to take place 2 days down the line. The meetings were 2 days down the line. He said he was not well and he wanted to cancel the last meeting. He won't be able to do 7 meetings. And both the chief secretary and DGP were vehemently agreeing. Yes, sir, aap kaise karenge? Aapki tabiyat theek nahi hai. Now, I kept listening for a while, but I couldn't hold myself. And this was a political issue, but I still spoke. I told him, sir, मैं कुछ दिन पहले डिस्ट्रिक्ट मैजिस्ट्रेट था और जब चीफ मिनिस्टर आते थे सब बड़ी तैयारी होती थी, लोगों में बड़ी आशाएं थे, एक्सपेक्टेशंस, एंटिसिपेशन. तो मेरा सजेशन ये है सर कि आप चाहे बोले नहीं लेकिन जाए 2 मिनट के लिए नमस्कार करके चले. He got very angry at me. आप क्या समझते मैं जा सकता हूँ? The moment he said it, the chief secretary started nudging me to keep quiet. But I didn't keep quiet. I told him, sir, मेरा काम आपको एडवाइस करना है, बाकी आप डिसाइड कीजिए, आपको जाना ना जाना. फिर उन्होंने मेरी तरफ देखा, फिर he kept nudging me. And there was pin drop silence for 10 seconds, after which Kalyan Singh ji turns towards me and tells me, Anil ji, aap theek keh rahe hain. The moment he said it, the chief secretary immediately stopped nudging and they said, हाँ sir, बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहा है. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because if you have such chief secretaries sitting as advisors to the chief minister, Exactly what you're telling the problem will be. It's not that they aren't available. And this episode I had forgotten. When Mr. Kalyan Singh became Chief Minister for the second time, and I was not in the habit of meeting politicians, I never met politicians for any personal favor. So he called me after 3 days after taking over. He asked me, आप अनिल अब मुझसे मिलने नहीं आए? मैंने कहा सर मैंने सोचा आप व्यस्त होंगे, जब आप खाली होंगे मैं आ जाऊंगा. बोले नहीं आप तुरंत आ जाइए. मैं चला गया. जब मैं गया उनके कमरे में, कहते हैं मैं आपको अपना सचिव बनाना चाहता हूं. By this time I had got promoted. So he said मैं आपको अपना सेक्रेटरी बनाना चाहता हूं. मैंने कहा जो आपका आदेश हो. तो he says कि आप पूछेंगे नहीं मैं क्यों बनाना चाहता हूं. मैं सर आपने सोच समझ के किया हो. बोले नहीं बैठो मैं बताता हूं. Then he narrated this incident to me and he tells me कि मैंने आपको इसलिए सचिव बनाया कि आप अपनी बात कहते हैं मुझसे. You know, Kalyan Singh's tenure from 90 to 92 was considered to be one of the finest golden areas of UP because he allowed such civil servants to speak their mind out. You know, the problem is there are officers available to speak their mind out, but they will be inconvenient to a politician. And I've seen that. You would like to push them out. Now, that's the choice that the politician has to make. Whether he wants Nindak Niyare Rakhiye. You know, Kalyan Singh actually used this phrase to me. कि मैं आपको इसलिए आया कि मैं निंदक नीरे रखा. हमने कहा साहब that's your choice. If you want me there, I'll be there. So now, I tell in my book to the civil servants that we can't do much to politicians, for that matter anybody. But it is our duty to speak our mind out. And those that believe that they will suffer on account of speaking the mind out are wrong. Because then I quote a number of officers who've actually spoken the mind out. So when I am having a dialogue with my family, so to say, of civil servants, the language is that you have to change. You can't change the politician. Because politician is what he is. What can I do to him? Nothing. You can change because there are a number of officers. Ribeiro is there. Mr. Yogendran is there. I can name officers after officers. Now the choice is with the civil servant. And those youngsters who want to join the civil service, they must be clear in their mind. The choice is with you. You have to decide which path you want to take. Don't talk about nation. Everyone talks about nation and society. देश के बारे में बात कर करके देश का बेड़ा गर्क कर रहा है. You must become selfish. I tell youngsters, become selfish. Look inwards. Look at things that give you a kick, that makes you feel good from deep inside. Do that. And take the responsibility of it.
But sir, let me actually come to that, because you mentioned this, that yes, you need to be selfish, find out where you are getting the kick and then go ahead. But sir, you said the bureaucrats needs to tell the politician what needs to be done. Sir, but kai baar, in fact, most of the occasions, what essentially happens is that the power and the independence of the bureaucrat is hardly visible. We see bureaucrats being transferred left, right, and center. Like you said, there are a number of bureaucrats who've stood up, but then they've been transferred off. The vindictiveness of the political class, no, sir, there are like say for example, whether you see so I don't want to get into the specific examples, because the only thing is there are so very many of them. But I see this, and we often read, sir, that the political vindictiveness of the parties who are having absolute majority is such that the bureaucrats have to say yes to what they're saying. Very few politicians like Kalyan Singh, like you were saying, are such examples which essentially listen to the bureaucracy. Is this true?
See, let me explain this to you. First of all, this transfer business. And let me narrate an incident in my own case. Because I was not transferred so many times, but I was also transferred. I had returned from Delhi and become Secretary of Horticulture, and the scene was very corrupt. And same type of politician that you were telling me. Very vindictive and everything. So after 15 days, I got a written order from a minister, from my minister, asking me to suspend a deputy director. No explanation, nothing, just suspend. So I rang up the minister and asked, साहब आपने इनको निलंबित इस सस्पेंशन करने को कहा है, क्या कारण है? He said मुझसे मिलने नहीं आया. हमने कहा बड़ी छोटी चीज है, मैं अभी अधिकारी से कहता हूँ, he'll come and meet you. So I found out about that officer, and people told me he's very honest, very efficient. So I rang up that officer and asked him, यार तुम मिलने क्यों नहीं गए? मंत्री बड़े नाराज हैं. He said, सर मैं उनसे कई बार मिल चुका हूँ, लेकिन जैसे वो मिलना चाहते हैं मैं नहीं कर पा. The minister was corrupt. He wanted money from this job. Now, the dilemma that I faced was, how do I save this? The minister had passed a legal order. He was under law authority. But ethically it was wrong because there was no fault of his. Now how do I say? Now, I tell my colleagues that you should be fully conversant with the rules if you want to do the things correctly. And one of the rules was that if I disagreed with the minister, I could read the file to the chief secretary. So I spoke to the chief secretary, fortunately very fine officer, and he said, file mujhe bhej do, fir dekhte hain. So I said, chalo time, let me buy some time if nothing else. So I sent the file to him. Now this minister was very smart. He didn't speak to the chief secretary. He went and spoke to the chief minister and I was transferred out. I don't know what happened, I was transferred out. Chief secretary was very upset. He called me over. Yaar Anil, dekho, tumhara us adhikari ko bachane ke chakkar mein tumhara transfer ho gaya. So my answer to him was, and that's narrated in my book, sir, aap kyun pareshan hote hain? For a civil servant, transfer is like death. It is inevitable. Jo hona uske liye pareshan kya hona? And in any case, I believe in Hindu philosophy. I'll be born again. You're not kicking me out of service. You post me somewhere else. So you posted me somewhere else. Now the point that I'm trying to make here is, once the politician knows that transfers don't bother you, they will stop transferring because they want to bother you. Number two, when I joined the civil service, I also had this view that politicians are badmash. And I gradually discovered they aren't so. They are absolutely fabulous officers in all parties, or fabulous politicians. Kalyan Singh was from BJP, then Mallikarjun Kharge from Congress. I mean, Prakash Javadekar, I worked with him. Absolutely amazing politicians. So they're all types, like in civil service, in society, they're good, bad and ugly. Now the problem is that the honest officer thinks that only he's honest and rest are dishonest. And he does not want to accommodate the politician. He doesn't understand the difference between accommodation and compromise. You know, there is a lot of huge gray area between right and wrong. Now, if the politician, ultimate arbiter, wants to do things, your job is to guide him, tell him. If he overrules you, so be it. In my entire career, I can recall 90% of the cases I used to convince the politician. There were 10% cases where they overruled. So be it. I tell my fellow bureaucrats, yeah, tum revolutionary ho, you don't join the service. And the youngsters who are watching this, please don't come for revolution in the service. If you want to be a revolutionary, pick up a jhadu and join the political party. Don't join bureaucracy. In civil service, the bottom line is very simple. And bottom line is outlined by a monk, an American monk, Reinhold Niebuhr. Lord, grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change things that I can, and the wisdom to understand the difference between the two.
You've answered every question in a very, you've diplomatically handled every question. So I think you could have done really well, even if you were an ambassador and represented our country. I think you would have done a phenomenal job. But sir, I see so many of your colleagues, sir, and I must ask you this question. I see so many of your colleagues, once they retire from the service, they join, the bureaucrat retires from the service and then joins and becomes the minister. Now, this is the case with our current Honorable Foreign Minister, also with Hardeep Singh Puri ji, and also with R.K. Singh and numerous such other examples. Sir. Bureaucrats taking up political positions, doesn't it show that the bureaucracy, whilst it was the bureaucracy, was not independent of the political bosses and was only there to do their bidding, given the fact that given the fact that a bureaucrat, after he chooses a political party, loses all the credibility that he's got as a bureaucrat? And so your thoughts on this?
You know, I normally don't comment on these personal choices made by individuals. If you look at it as a percentage of civil servants joining politics, it would not be even 1%.
Right.
If it is not even 1%, then I'm talking of individuals, not as civil service as a whole. So to say that some percentage, 0.1% of civil servants, right now you have a cadre strength of 5,000 of IS officers. Right. How many have become civil servants? Not even 10. Become ministers. Not even 10. Maybe 15, 20 would have joined one political party or the other. That does not reflect on the objectivity of the civil servants. And the objectivity is not impacted by his desire to join a political party. In fact, more damaging in the service, his objectivity gets impacted by his personal interest elsewhere. That is more damaging. I don't think we unnecessarily blame politics for too many things. If a person wants to join politics in a democracy, I can't stop him from joining politics. You know, if a Supreme Court judge against whom there were sexual harassment charges, who held a press conference against another Chief Justice of Supreme Court, he is made member of parliament, then what are we talking about? So I would not like to go into such instances because there are individual cases. They do not reflect the ethos of that organization. So if 10 people do become ministers, does it impact? And let me tell you, majority of the IAS officers would not want to join politics because that's not how they've evolved. Now, why do you think that they are joining politics? Because you look at exceptions as news. By definition, news is an exception. But we generalize it and we feel that every civil servant has a political leaning in a way that it impacts his objectivity. I mean, there are many problems with this. There are many problems with the civil service, but this lack of objectivity is not on account of their political leanings. It is on account of their personal leanings. Number of them who are corrupt have leanings accordingly. Nothing to do with politics in it. Some may join politics, but I don't think that's the real problem. To me, the problem with civil service, and I've written, there's a full chapter in my book, Ethical Dilemmas, on what is the problem with the civil service and how it can be resolved. I don't think politics is any of the problem. My understanding of civil services, the real problem is that the process through civil service servant is selected and the manner in which he's trained and the manner in which he evolves as a bright and brilliant individual, but not as a group man. So I have suggested that we should select leaders, we should hone leadership qualities, we should encourage leadership. What is required is leadership, not individual brilliance. To me, that is the bane of the Indian administrative service. Some people do become leaders as they go along, but majority of them are not leaders. They are brilliant and bright individually. I mean, yesterday itself, I wrote an article on this issue on CNBC.
Right. No, who are great, like you said, like who are great followers, but not necessarily. You were very polite in saying that they're bright, but they follow more than they lead. And the fact that in civil services.
No, they don't even follow. See, the point is not, the problem is again not following. The problem is that they're individually so bright that the accommodation doesn't take place. So what happens is the bright and brilliant start blaming the system. They start saying that others obviously are not like you. A leader will take everyone along with him. So it's not question of following. No, if they were followers, it would help. But they aren't, because, so for example, a district magistrate doesn't have to follow anybody. He has to take his entire team with him. He is not an individual only. So he has to be a team man. No, UPSC is one of the finest institutions in the country. But what it selects by definition is people who can write well in those 3 hours. How do you know that this guy is going to become a leader? No, leadership qualities are much beyond what is tested in UPSC. So I have suggested that system needs to change to select, because in private sector, I know, I had gone to Berkeley also where I understood. Today you have the tools to select people who have such leadership qualities in them. And you can hone them further. You can mentor them. That is the problem with civil service today.
But sir, then don't you think that Prime Minister Modi's move of lateral entry in civil services should be applauded by the bureaucracy and by people in civil services as a whole? Do you think that that move? I've seen so many bureaucrats complaining about lateral entry. बोलो को कुछ पता नहीं है. And
the point is, first, I'm not against lateral entry. Personally, I'm not against it. But who we are selecting and how we are selecting. That's very important. Because who we are selecting similar type as you were letting in the beginning, then what is the difference it is going to make? And the manner of selection is very, very important. If the selection is not through UPSC, then we are in serious trouble. Then we have committed people coming in, then there will be spoil system. So I have no problem with lateral entry, provided we are clear in our mind. But let us look at the objective of this. If the objective is to bring expertise in the civil service, then we are in trouble again. Because what is required at joint secretary and senior level is not so much of expertise, because expertise can be outsourced. Attitude cannot. What you have to have civil servants who have the right attitude. Attitude towards accepting things. Attitude being positive. Attitude being able to delegate. Attitude to trust. Attitude to help. This is what is required, not expertise. I mean, I have been co-secretary, I was education secretary. I hardly knew any of these sectors. It doesn't really make a difference, because as Secretary Government of India, you don't have to be an expert. In fact, if you are an expert, there will be serious trouble. You are going to fight with other experts. On the contrary, the job of a civil servant is to create that environment where the experts can thrive. The domains are very different. You don't have to compete with experts. So you look at private sector, most of the CEOs are not experts in the domain. They are the only expertise that is required at that level is your capability to manage men and women, get the best out of them. That's what is required, not expertise in that area. But whatever little that you have to learn, you can learn within a year, within a month or two. It doesn't take more than 2 months to understand the basics of it. Beyond it, so for example, technology. I mean, one thing which I prided myself in was not understanding technology as much as understanding the use of technology. Now, this difference has to be understood very clearly. You may not know what C++ is, what language is, but you would know how to use that. And I use that to the hilt, actually, all technology. So it's a question of your management skills, your leadership skills, rather than your expertise.
Rather than your expertise. So, but so the thing is that, like you rightly mentioned, that it's your leadership skills that set you apart. And you've dedicated an entire chapter in your book. So let me ask you this as the second last question. You have said that the UPSC is a great institution and so on and so forth. But the problem, and like you have elucidated today, is the fact that they are not given enough leadership training necessarily. And so am I correct in understanding that the leadership component, the leadership component is what you are specifying?
No, I understand. The manner in which selection happens is purely objective. You can't influence UPSC. So to that extent, they are absolutely above board. But the manner of examination and what is asked does not test the leadership quality of an individual. The only aspect of leadership that is tested is his written communication skills, his capacity to analyze, which is also important for a leader. But there are many more attributes that are required for a leader. He should be able to trust others. He should be able to delegate. He should be able to motivate. Now, these are things that don't get tested. And when you join the service, since you are only bright and brilliant of a person, you have brilliant actors, you have brilliant writers, you have brilliant poets in the civil service. But I don't know whether they can be used for the purpose of leadership. You have to test the leadership skills. And today, there are tools that are available. What I'm trying to say is, the same UPSC can use those tools. I'll give you a clear example. You set me 4 individuals and leave them with me for an hour. I'll tell you within an hour as to who of them is going to be leader among them. Why? Because they're tools. Put them through a group discussion in half an hour. And you will immediately start discerning. You may still go wrong in about 20% cases, but 80% cases you will be able to know that this guy has the potential to become a leader. Now, it will take much more time than what UPSC does now. But given the critical positions that an IAS officer occupies, he can actually destroy a department. Destruction is very easy. So a very bright, brilliant individual, you must do, if some researcher is sitting here, look at where the toppers of the IAS are, and you will understand what I'm saying. So I did a bit of a,
No, you've mentioned this, which is why I'm saying it. It's outside what I wanted to ask you. You said, observe where the toppers of the IAS are. So I want to give you the example of probably somebody that you know well, Manoj Nathji. He was in 1973, he finished 3rd as a 20-year-old in terms of the IAS. And he cleared the examination and was then a part of the IPS. I apologize, it was then he joined the IPS. And thereafter, he rose on to become, he rose the ranks and became the DGP per se. Now in 1980, in the Bokaro steel plant case, he basically went after the person who was the prime culprit, sir. And he arrested the Bokaro MD, the steel MD. After that, within 24 hours, he was handed, this is a bright officer with great leadership abilities as well, who was then given in 24 hours, a chitti saying, "Aap transfer ho gaye." This man has not been considered for any position of high office in our country and not been given any high portfolio to any high position in his service to handle. He's been
my dear friend. No, my dear friend. I hope you read my book. No, I hope you read my book because it answers this question. It answers this question.
Let me just. The last line is. Sorry to interrupt, but the last line. So he was transferred 40 times in 39 years. So,
no, see, I have come across officers who wear these transfers as badges here. Number of officers who've done nothing in their lives. The reason is very clear. Honesty is necessary for a civil servant, but not a sufficient condition for him to be called efficient. He is paid not merely to be honest. An officer has to perform. The common man does not merely expect honesty out of officers. He expects performance. A large number of us do nothing. Just wear this honesty here and keep fighting with everyone. They believe that rest of the world is dishonest. Now, I don't know this case individually, which you are mentioning. Otherwise, I could have analyzed and give you. But the cases that I've studied, first and foremost, is that we live in a country where we say, but we are so obsessed with results. So what you're putting before me are the results. It's not that I was transferred. I gave you an example if I was transferred. It's your attitude. See, transfer is not in your control. Someone else does it. Why bother about it, yaar? Why bother about issues? But if you evolve as an individual to be reckoned with, if there's a coal crisis, you will be called to become coal secretary without having met the prime minister. What the point that I'm trying to make here is, खुदी को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से कुछ पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या है. These are the final 2 lines of my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. Irrespective of the set of circumstances, there are large number of civil servants who have done extremely well by being honest and efficient. Yes, there are cases, the ones that you have mentioned, where an honest officer has suffered. But as I mentioned to you, I have seen 2 chief secretaries of a state going behind the bars. So they were dishonest, went behind the bars. So it's not that it is, since there will be many youngsters participating in this, my advice to them is very clear. Whichever path you choose, don't ever visualize that's a smooth path. Whether a path of dishonesty or honesty, you take a call. Please take that path with your eyes wide open and be prepared for the consequences. I can only with my experience tell you there are problems in either of the path, but that's the beauty of life. If there are no problems, what is the beauty of it?
Very true.
You won't enjoy it. So my suggestion to you is only simple. Enjoy the moments that you are in. Enjoy the moments that you are in. Love the moments that you are in. Future ko to pata hi nahi hai yaar, kya hoga. So long as you enjoy the moment. I enjoyed those moments as a civil servant. And that's why I say if I were to go on again, I'd like to be an IAS officer.
How nice. How nice. No, as they say, sir, as you rightly said,
there is an interesting question. There is an interesting observation here. The person says, but sir, if you are transferred so many times, your performance, आपने किसी का ठेका लिया है. The problem arises जब आप समाज का ठेका नहीं ले लगते. अरे जितना आपको टाइम मिल रहा है, आपसे मैं 1 घंटे बात कर रहा हूँ. मैं उस 1 घंटे में अपना एंजॉय करूं, उसके बाद क्या होगा ना आपको पता है ना मुझे पता है. हम क्यों परेशान होते हैं कि मेरी परफॉर्मेंस का क्या हो? आपकी परफॉर्मेंस इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी जज्ड बाय व्हाट द अदर गाय इज सेइंग. योर परफॉर्मेंस विल अल्टीमेटली बी जज्ड. आई कीप टेलिंग एवरीबॉडी माय ट्रू वर्थ हैज बीन डिटरमाइंड आफ्टर माय रिटायरमेंट, नॉट ड्यूरिंग सर्विस, बिकॉज़ नाउ आई एम moved through and I know my worth and others know my worth and I know others' worth. That's the real.
Which is why we are so excited to have you as a part of our academic council also, which is why I chased you and I said you have to be a part of it. But we equally admired you when you were education secretary. But sir, let me say this, that you mentioned that you should enjoy the moment, because yesterday I fundamentally also believe this, that yesterday was history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is the present, and that's why it's called a gift.
Absolutely.
Which is why I want to take you to the fun part of what we do, which is the last 2 minutes. What is the first one thing that comes to your mind? So when I say the following things, the first thing that comes to your mind in one word, sir, what is it that comes to your mind when I say India?
Service.
When I say civil services, then what comes to your mind?
Commitment.
Corruption.
Manageable.
Prime Minister Modi.
Great, but could do better.
That's interesting. This is not a news channel, but that's very interesting. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh.
He shouldn't have been there.
Okay. And the last one. When I say IIMUN, or the organization India's International Movement to Unite Nations, sir, what is the first thought that comes to your mind, sir? when you think of the organization?
I have only known it through you and Rishabh, and you are brilliant. You are brilliant. You are one of the most articulate persons I've come across.
Sir, it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to do this and speak to you, sir. On behalf of the 1,700 who joined us originally, and even right now, sir, you will be surprised on the top right-hand corner of the screen, sir. You will see 1,088 students paying attention to what you are saying, over choosing the bad boy billionaire and the scam 1992, because this is the man who solved a bigger scam than that. And I think today, honestly, you've inspired very many. On behalf of everyone at IIMon, I strongly recommend this book, The Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, not because Anil sir is somebody whom I personally greatly admire and revere, but I think would make an interesting read for not just people who are going to aspire for civil services, but also the ethical dilemmas, the question of dharma versus adharma, what is right, what is wrong. That is answered beautifully in his book. Anil Swaroop ji, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you. God bless you.